Hello, and it is still Cleveland Open Project discussion on cleveland.com/TV. It is a program where we discuss Africa on behalf of Africans in diaspora. All right, Cleveland.com is an unparalleled media platform meticulously crafted to cater specifically to discerning information. We do recognize the significance of establishing an online space that empowers the public to showcase their work while fostering connections with a diverse and engaging audience, paving the way for a harmonious blend of purpose as we promote, create awareness, and educate the public, and help spread information on societal issues with the aim of influencing people's attitudes, behaviors, beliefs through online publication. All right, so sign up with us now on www.com. You create your content and then we'll help you create awareness globally. All right, my name is Frank Kalide Mutia, and we're going to be focusing today on business and tourism opportunities and the role of the media in the African diaspora market. My guests this evening are Honorable Fielder Nani Kering, who is the Minister of the Environment and Tourism, Republic of Botswana. You're welcome to the program, ma'am. Hello, ma'am. I guess he's here to join us. All right. We also have, I also have, hello, ma'am.
Oh, I can hear you.
Her mic is off. Her mic is muted. Hello, ma'am.
My mic is not muted.
Yeah, it's very faint. Could barely hear you.
No.
Could you please unmute your mic, please? Hello, ma'am. Please unmute your mic.
My mic is unmuted.
It's very faint, yeah. That should be network problem. We're trying to set that up so that we can have our good visual at the same time audio. Very important.
Yeah, it might be a network problem.
I guess so. All right. White Honorable Fielder sets up her internet. We'll go ahead with the introduction and the interviews. All right. I also have Honorable Moses Vilakati, who is a former Minister of Tourism and Environmental Affairs, Eswatini. You're welcome to the program, Honorable.
I am pleased to be part of the panel.
Good to have you with us. And then last on the list is Mr. Allen St. Onji, who's always been a regular face on this show, lending his voice to topical issues relating to Africa and its development. He is a former Minister for Tourism and Culture, Seychelles. Mr. Allen, you're welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Franca. Happy to be here with this distinguished panel.
Good to have you with us. All right, we'll start. I would have liked to take my first question with Honorable Fielder, but surprisingly, she's not joining us yet. So I'll direct my question to Honorable Moses, all right, which is X-railing the tourism sector in Africa. How far have we gone? How well have we gone? Are there things that we need to do, things that need to be put in place, and others? Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, and audience at home. The question that you have asked is a mammoth one, but I'll just echo a few of my sentiments. One of the things that we have encountered worldwide has been the issue of COVID-19, which really affected our tourism sector in a big way. We saw hotels closing, we saw tourists being strangulated in their own places. And fortunately for now, as we look forward, the tourism sector has shown its resilience, and people are moving. Flights are now on the move. We're seeing hotels filling up. I take a case of Eswatini. During the months of August to September, almost all the hotels were full, and we just needed more space, which to me said we have an opportunity when it comes to businesses where hotels and accommodations are needed. Worldwide, we're also seeing a surge in the number of people who are traveling east, west, south, north, south, which shows that picking up. We are hopeful that by the end of the year, we would have reached probably up to 70 or 80% of what we used to get pre-COVID times. And what is also the economies generally in the world have been doing generally well. Unfortunately, the wars that have occurred, Russia, Ukraine, now Israel and the Hamas are affecting us in terms of the people who are able to travel, and resources are now channeled to such calamities that are obtaining. But generally, from a tourism perspective, let me say that we are coming of age. We will soon get to our 100% tourist visits as we had before COVID-19.
All right, we'll come back to the constraint, but I still want Honorable Anfiuda to lend her voice to that. How do you rate the continent tourism sector now? Oh, she's still not back. I'm still having problem at her end. But I really like something added to that. You've done so well with that explanation, Honorable Sabo. Mr. Allen, let's get your view, all right, about the African tourism sector. Are there things that we are supposed to still be doing?
I think Minister Vilakazi spoke well about what we have and what can. And I know when Minister Kereng spoke earlier, she referred to we are reviving the industry. I think it is a good word. Yes, we're reviving. But as Africa, we can't sit and say we are reviving it. We need to revive it. We need to make it a must to happen. And it doesn't happen by itself. This is quite clear. We will need everybody to rally to make things happen. But I think, and then Minister Vilakazi made it very plain when you spoke. It takes time, yes, but we must also realize when our key source markets, tourism source markets, catches, if they just sneeze, we catch a cold immediately. We catch the cold because we depend on these tourism source markets, because Africa has been unable so far to provide the arriving guests for ourselves, from ourselves. Yes, maybe it is financial, but also Africa, as we prefer to travel to Europe, to the Americas, to Asia, than to visit Africa. These are challenges. How do we make us, people from the continent and the islands of the continent, visit more our own continent before going to the North Pole? Is it something that we shy off? Is it that there is better things there? Is it that their culture entices us to visit them? They are all challenges that we face. But I think, and I've said that before, on this program, Africa needs to write its narrative. It needs to come out with its own narrative to showcase what Africa has, and then everything else will follow. Unless we start writing our narrative, we will depend on other people to do it for us. Everybody has their own wheelbarrow that they are pushing forward, and their wheelbarrow is not necessarily the one that we are putting our food in. So we need to really look at it, reflect on it as a continent, as inhabitants of the continent and as Africans, to say what do we want from our tourism industry. And I think this is what the panel should be looking at tonight. What do we want? How do we achieve it?
All right. Thank you so much for bringing that out. That was actually supposed to be my next question, and let me direct it to Honorable Moses. All right. what do we really want with the African tourism sector, and then how do we make people to start having Africa as a destination for tourism?
Africa is a huge potential, which unfortunately is not well known. I think it starts from there. When we watch the news, we read newspapers, social media, etc., you find that the narrative is usually about the wars in Africa, about the poverty in Africa, about the soil degradation, the poverty in Africa, which doesn't attract the players when it comes to business opportunities, because business and tourism, they are brothers and sisters. But you need to tell your story so that the person who is out there that this is what is obtaining in Africa. This is what is obtaining in a particular country. Then you'll get or attract those tourists. We've had a number of tourists that have come to Africa through word of mouth. They've been telling others. But I don't think we have been able to market ourselves. One, as a continent. Two, as regional blocks. Three, then as countries. Because we have to realize that we are fighting for the same pie. That's the number of people who are traveling. So we need, therefore, a strategy that will say, how many of those can therefore come to Africa? And what is it? What are the niche markets that we have that will allow an individual to leave Europe and come to Africa, to leave the Americas and come to Africa, to leave Australia and come to Africa? So I think that's for me is the missing link, which is about marketing ourselves, what is good in Africa. Maybe there's a bit of history here. Sometimes we're not good at marketing ourselves. We think that somebody else will tell our story. And yet, if we do not tell our story, who else will tell your story? Exactly. I think I can end there for now.
All right, I got 2 points from what you said, which is changing the bad narratives and also marketing ourselves. But now, I think I would like to bring in the media at this point. When we talk about marketing ourselves, we cannot really do that without the media. We need a media, a designated media, a structured media dedicated for this purpose. All right. Now, let's get to look at the role of media, all right, in marketing Africa, in marketing our good narratives, in marketing this continent. What do you think is the role of media? Because definitely, Cleveland.com is dedicated to that task. Marketing, already good narratives of Africa. But unfortunately, we still have so many people that have not bought into the vision of Cleveland.com. All right. So what do you think is the role of the media in selling or marketing Africa?
I'm not sure who is directed to.
Yeah, I'm talking to you, please, Honorable Moses. I want you to, what should we be doing? What should the media be doing in this regard? What should be the role of the media in this regard?
I think the media is a very important role to play. The media in Africa or worldwide, as I've pointed out, portrays Africa in the negative narrative. Now, we need to start projecting what Africa has and its potential and what it can actually attain. Africa, fortunately, about 60% of its population is youth. And the youth in Africa have got the gadgets, so they do get into social media.
Exactly.
But I don't think we've exploited that narrative such that that they can be able to channel that energy to promoting Africa. They tend to use the social media for other things other than marketing themselves. From a village perspective, you know, I've seen some villages where you have got youngsters dancing and whatever. I've seen the cultural experiences in Africa. We in Eswatini are proud of our culture, and every now and then, every 3 months, we have got cultural activities, and it attracts lots of people. Unfortunately, when they come, when you try to interview, they say, we didn't know about this. Yet, our culture has been in existence for the past 400 years. It has a 400-year lineage, but it is not well known. That shows that we have not been able to exploit the media to the best of our ability. Instead, we concentrate on the general news, this and this, this and this, instead of saying, what are the best things that you can see? The biodiversity that is there. We have countries that have got over 600 birds in one part of our region, for example. We've got over 600 birds, different birds species. Now, we have people out there who love to track birds, and they do not know about this. I am the one that knows about it. So, which means we've not been able to utilize our media to the fullest. Two, I think what we usually tend to find is that our media is more focused on the calamities that obtains. As I pointed out, the issue of poverty, the issue of strikes, the issue of the commotion, the issue of upheavals, and at the expense of what Africa can offer to the outside world, such that the person out there says, hey, do I go to this country? Yes, I find myself in a strife situation. I find myself in a difficult situation. I might not even get out of that part of those particular countries. But also Africa has missed an opportunity when it comes to connectivity, because that's one of the areas that is really, really missing, be it by air or through roads infrastructure, because our infrastructure tends to be dilapidated. We leave it unattended up until it is terrible and terrible and terrible. And if one person comes there, he says, look, moving from one country to the next, I have had a problem just driving through. In Africa, which unfortunately I've already had presidents and heads of state now changing the narratives with regards to the visas. I mean, really, why should I have a visa to Seychelles? Of course, I don't need one, but these are some of the...
All right, sir. Hello, I'll let you continue with that, please, sir. But let's try and separate it from the main topic so that as we take it, the audience can be carried along with our discussion. Okay. All right. So what you just explained is actually the constraints, part of the constraints to the growth of the tourism sector in Africa. We did mention the first one, which is the COVID-19. Then you are not talking about the connectivity. All right. So please go. You can go ahead now.
Thank you very much. I've already talked about the connectivity, because when you go to the Americas, the Europas, etc., there's free flow of goods and services and people from one place to the next. And I think what I've noticed in the past, let's say 4 or 5 months, I've seen various countries saying, hey, in between Africa, intra-Africa, we won't need visas. Later on, from those coming outside of Africa, the intra-trade, we've had this Africa trade that we are trying to push, is also an opportunity that we have not yet exploited. When you look at the AU, at some point they said there should be one passport, for example, connecting all of Africa. in the Agenda 2063. But we have not yet started looking at that and yet that is really, really vital. If you look at the tourists coming to a particular country, a particular region, at the end of the year, they pick their passports. They want to see how many countries did I visit this year. But sometimes they want to get to a particular country because there is a constraint to get in there. Now, also, the information is lacking. Go to the websites of our various countries. There is very little information which talks to the things that obtain in that particular country. I'll touch a quick one from Eswatini. We have the largest granite formation rock in the world, but people do not know about that. They know about the one in Australia, but that one is not granite formed because we have not been able to market this so that people can come and see it. We have the oldest mine in the country, in Eswatini, one of the oldest mines, but people out there do not know. It's only recent when we have started saying, let's preach this gospel, let's preach this narrative. So for me, the media is very, very vital, particularly now that social media is cheaper. It can access a lot of people at a go, and also the development of websites, country websites, but also we could also develop websites regional. Maybe we can start regionally and then expand when it comes to this website so that people are able to tap in there and say, hey, if I'm in Nigeria, the next thing I'll be in Ghana and whatever. So it becomes easier. There's that seamless flow of the tourists that come to that particular region.
All right, thank you so much, sir. You just made sure to analyze some of the constraints on restricting the development of the African tourism sector. But I still want us to take a look more at the place of the media, all right, in selling Africa and then changing the narratives of the continent, all right? Like I said earlier, Cleveland.com exists with just that mission. It is an African platform dedicated for the Africans, just to sell the continent of Africa, all right? Mr. Allen, I needed to add a bit of what Honorable John said, the place of the media in selling the continent of Africa.
I've listened to Minister Vilakazi with interest. I think what he says, yes, true. But I think we need to go a step back. Who will do the selling of our continent? Who will sell our respective countries to the world, to the source markets for tourism? Do we expect a commercial setup that is looking at sensational news to tell the world, because that makes their audience attract themselves to their TV or to their newspapers? Do you expect them to say that you've got your rock formation or your 600 birds? No, it is not sensation, and they won't do it. This is the beauty of Cleveland, because they are part of Africa and they are looking how to grow Africa. I think a point that I'd like to make, we need to take a step back. What is tourism is the question that we must ask. And then once we've answered that question, we must then say, how do we push this tourism industry forward? You've spoken about air connectivity, the roads that are in a terrible state, and yes, it's all true. But what is tourism that you're attracting people to come to visit you? It's the country. It's not the hotel. It's definitely not the roads. It's not the airline. It is the country as a whole.
Exactly.
Once we've identified that this country wants tourism, we then make appeals to people like Cleveland and say, how do we create a panel to push that country? It doesn't happen by itself. This is quite clear. And we know that Africa as a continent has everything possible, from royalty to skiing down mountains to waterfalls. You name it, we have it. But are we selling it? Probably not as we should. You said one thing, Minister Vilakazi, that is true. We're all fighting our own little battles, or we go fishing in the same pond to get as much fish as we can get. But the pond is always has its limits. You'll run out of fish if we keep on plowing in that same little pond.
Exactly.
We need to grow the market. We need to be instrumental in having regional blocks, East Africa, Southern Africa, Western Africa, Central Africa, Northern Africa, to work as blocks, so that when somebody arrives in Eswatini, he would also visit probably South Africa, would also visit Zambia and probably Zimbabwe. So we sell as blocks. That's easily done because the Indian Ocean Islands have done it before. We've got the Vanilla Islands that work this way. But who will transmit the message to the world? And I think we can go round in circle. We can say, yes, there's social media, of course. But to have a website today, create the best website. If no one knows about that website, how do you get people logging in?
Exactly.
So we need, again, to sell the country and its website. It keeps adding on to that visibility. And I think when I was in office, I used to say, and I say it today because I do consultancy with different countries in Asia, I say visibility. You need three things to succeed in tourism. The first one is visibility. The second one is visibility. And the third one is also visibility. So you need the three to make it work. So we have to knock on the door of the media that have that same optic, that same vision of wanting the continent or your country to grow. Who's responsible for it is where we will need to know. Is it you as minister? There's a limit to what you will do alone. Sales and marketing and visibility aspects is a profession. It cannot be done by a politician. It's impossible. You'll need to call on professionals to do it. And professionals will come in with a media setup and say, how do we promote this country? Now the world travel market has just finished. Have we looked? Google tomorrow morning. See how many African countries appear on Google to say we were at WTM in London, and this is what we promoted, a new resort with everything else. The world sits on top, the sun is right on top of it, and the moon shines on the side in the pool. You can have it, but if nobody knows, you know, many years ago, Seychelles had one logo that was called the best kept secret of the seven seas. When I started as a young person in tourism, I visited London and knocked on the doors of the press. And one British press, even though we were a British colony before, looked at me and says, we don't hear much about your country. And I said, of course you must know. And he says, what is your tagline? And I said, best kept secret of the seven seas. He looked at me and he laughed. He said, and you expect tourism to work? You've got a best kept secret. Keep it there. Nobody will come to you. If you want to be known, we have to go beyond our own little doorstep, tell the world that we exist, work with partners that can do it, and then the sitting ministers will succeed because their country's tourism is succeeding. They get the glory for it anyway. But you need to call on the professionals, and I salute the work that Clive Nard is attempting to do. I salute them for it. Not easy, costly, but they keep going. Are we giving them the necessary support? Probably not yet. We need Africa to rise, as they say, that thunder of the roar of the lion or something, to come out and say, we exist as Africa. We have a tourism industry. It needs to work, and we will work with partners that makes it work. I mean, I'm doing work today in different parts of the world. I was in Egypt 2 weeks ago, and then I represented another country in Dubai, preparing their stand for the Arabian travel market that comes in May next year, that they're redesigning their stand. How many of us around Africa do that work? Quite a few. But a lot of countries that need it more are the ones that are trying to do it themselves and not even calling on people like Clive Nard, but those that don't need are the ones looking at experts in the field to come and assist them. We need to move beyond our own quarters, call on professionals, And I know me and Minister Vilakati, we know each other well, and we chatted earlier that probably we've got some work to do in another part of Africa together. But yes, it can be done. Yes, there are opportunities. Yes, the door is open, but let's not wait for people to do it for us.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Ale. You've always been lending a good voice to the cause of the African story. All right, and let me quickly add to that when you made mention of the website. The truth is this, when you sign up as a country on the cleveland.com website, you are automatically granted an access to a website of your own, automatically created a website for yourself. So instead of using money, getting money to buy or create or build up a website, automatically as you sign up freely on www.cleveland.com, a website is one of the advantages that you get there. But I thank you so much once again. I do hope Honorable Feudal is here with us now, but somehow we are still not able to connect with her. Now, when we were talking earlier, we did make mention of the constraints, all right, for the growth of tourism in Africa. We made mention of the effects of COVID-19. We talked about connectivities and one other. But there is one thing that we are actually missing, all right? We've had some persons, some tourist European countries coming into the African countries, and then they complain that when they come, they are being exploited. They're having to pay different taxes for transportation, for the hotels visited, and then for all that stuff. And that again tends to drive tourists away from the continent of Africa. In this regard, one would have expected that instead of doing that, instead of the tourist leads, all right, the tour guides to exploit these people in such a way, can we look for, is it possible to look for the government or for the government to come in and then coordinate these activities in such a way that even if the tourists are paying those taxes for it, it is controlled and then the excesses of it goes into the government account? Honorable Moses, I'd like you to lend your voice to that.
No, thank you very much. You are touching on an important aspect where we find that tourists now are meant to, it becomes very expensive to actually come to various countries because there's always that belief that if you are a tourist, maybe you are carrying a lot of money or something like that. One of the things that I've noted, I don't know whether it's a new trend, maybe Alan can help here, he is more seasoned in this area, is that nowadays there's a meeting in a particular place, the rates just escalate so much such that it becomes difficult for you to visit such places. And yet we are trying to promote MICE as part of the tourism agenda. But also you find that in some countries, whenever there is somebody who is trying to help get a person like Alan, he's very experienced. He now says, look, you guys, I can come up with a very good plan for your tourism to move forward. Instead of looking at that as an asset, looking at him as an asset, we start saying, yeah, I mean, since he has been doing it all over the place, he must be having a lot of food. How much are you going to also leave behind? And yet the person is saying, how can we exploit the tourism space for the benefit of those particular countries?
Exactly.
I've heard about such things happening, which is very, very unfortunate, because as you know, whenever you are trying to help, like Cleveland is, for example, coming up with a very good and noble idea, which is connecting Africa. That is what we should be celebrating. That is what we should be assisting, because it now promotes Africa as a whole. It promotes regions, as Alan said. It promotes various countries on what they can offer. I still believe that we have a long way to appreciate and understand how to actually promote ourselves. For me, that's the missing link, because instead of focusing on the promotion, the marketing, etc., sometimes we start looking at the fact that maybe we are not benefiting now, and yet some of these things are long term. You know, when you look at marketing and promoting a particular country, it takes a while for people to start realizing. And others will always be saying, is it true? Is it real? Somebody tastes it. That's when then they say, it is true. It is happening. But maybe we could also start copying what, let's say, Europe has been doing of marketing. Yes, they market as sometimes as different countries, but the issue of regionalization of things is very, very helpful, because we all know that if you want to get a good marketing of your country, the WTM of this world, that's where you would be able to see lots of players coming into the space. What if we do the same? I know that in Africa, Southern Africa, we usually have the Cape Town, the Durban, and the like. But I don't think we've been able to synergize this such that it becomes regional, as Alan has pointed out, such that it can also now attract East Africa, West Africa, etc., etc. And then, so that ultimately, this now becomes a point where even a person who is in Europe will say, okay, if I want to penetrate Africa, this is the place to be. This is the way it's done, which is why I like Cleveland, because they are able to say, let's bring Africa together. But I still believe as governments, we have not been able to capitalize on this noble activity, which I believe will change the narrative. Maybe we're still sowing a seed. Hey, maybe let's take it from a positive angle and say, hey, we're probably still sowing a seed. 5-10 years along the line, people will start realizing that bringing in all of these aspects together under one roof helps to market Africa, so that people understand the real things that are obtaining in Africa. Because else now it's got wildlife. I talk about marketing a country. Yes, they also want to see, if you're marketing that country, what is it that I would be able to capture? What is it that I'll be able to see in that particular country? So, which means now we have to, yes, it's a country, but we also have to elevate the obtaining situation. What is the narrative? What are the niches that are obtaining in that particular country, obtaining in that region? When these tourists come to Africa, they can be able to spend 20 days, 10 days, 15 days. That means the GDP of our countries will then improve.
All right, thank you so much. Mr. Allen, let's get to hear your view on that. Exploits by tourist guides, and then the role the government should be playing.
You see, tourism is a fragile industry. It's a very fragile and volatile industry. Tourists, before leaving home, and where we sell, now it was World Travel Market in London just finished. We have to be upfront to say these are costs, this is what happens. Use licensed operators, don't lose unlicensed operators. We have to be very clear that tourism, you can't say, well, I'll let him come and then I'll bleed him to death. It doesn't happen. Because if he's happy, maybe he'll tell 2 or 3 people that he's been happy. But if he's unhappy, he'll tell 20 to 50 people, don't go there. It's a terrible country. So it has to be very clear. I think on the point of arrival of countries, that's why earlier I said, what is your tourism? What do you call tourism of your country? If it is the hotel that you have 5 stars, if it is your mountain, if it is your king in Eswatini, they are assets. We must make a list of unique selling points that we have, these key USPs. We must then tell the world that they exist. But don't expect any TV station or any written press to just write and say, Minister Vilakathi in Eswatini has these unique selling points. It's not news. These are promotional bona fide promotional news that you will try and sell through your own marketing style and approach that you follow, which is where Cliff. But I think what we have to know, our unique selling points of Africa, how many people really know them? I mean, I was called in Gabon once to go and see their tourism industry, and I was amazed that they've got a waterfall that's massive in the mountains, massive. And I was so surprised, and they asked me to cross it in a little boat to the other side, and on the other side there was a beach up in the woods. Nobody knows, even though they were looking at putting a 5-star resort up there in that where the waterfall is. We need somebody to sit with each tourism minister of the 54 states and say, what are the unique selling points of that country? Where they supersede each other, then you'll say, waterfalls, we've got them in Gabon, we've got them in Zimbabwe, Zambia. Yes. And then we'll start playing around with all these unique selling points to have like a Bible for traveling in Africa. Rock formation, as you say, you've got your granite long formation. Seychelles also has granite boulders, and the only one that's on an island. But we managed in Seychelles to tell the world that it exists, and it's a unique selling point. The question that we have, and I say it again, the main question we have, who will sell us to the world? Is it a minister who's a politician? No. That's not his job. He will guide, he will approve the framework, he will approve the budget, he will say, yes, I like these unique selling points, but you forgot to put that I also have a king, add the king in there. Because when you think of, if today you say, I want to see where the king stays, immediately everybody thinks of England. You'll go and see where King Charles stays, Buckingham Palace. But we have them in Africa. We've got a few of them. And maybe it is time to call all the royalties of Africa together, to have like a meeting of them, where we have a brochure that says, royalty in Africa, these are the countries, this is where they make a public audience and wave to the people. It is important that maybe we use a body like Clivenard and say, let's find our unique selling points. Let us then work on them to ensure that the world knows that it exists. I mean, the returning of diaspora to our own lands, it'll be done by the main press. It won't be done by you advertising to say that, oh yeah, your great-great-granddad left our shores many years ago. Yes, they are interested already. But how do you entice them to come back? I visited a country 2 weeks ago. I was working to address a conference there. And I don't know why I never went there all my life, because I should have. I know its unique selling points. I've always known that it existed. But they'd never been able in the past to trigger this little switch to say, visit me. And this will be done by the press generally. Of course, you know that Lesotho has ski slopes and you do an annual ski run. Everybody knows it. How many people make the travel to go there to do that? Of course there are some, but not enough. We need to have a surplus of tourists because we have everything. We need to be able to sell it, and to sell it, we need to get the visibility concept of Africa to be on the lips of every potential discerning traveler that's looking at a holiday, an experience, and a holiday of a lifetime with them and their family. Do you think Africa is unsafe? Of course not. Africa is very safe as a continent, very safe for tourists. But if you talk to the normal tourists on the street in London, Paris, New York, or whatever, they'll all tell you, oh, you could be eaten by wild animals, or you could be killed because there are wars, or there's Ebola. But this is because this is sensation. Whereas the safety of Africa, we are unable to promote it because we don't work together. When there's Ebola, we all scream, it's not in our country, it's there down the road from us. But Africa gets the connotation that there's Ebola, and you think it's everywhere. There's a problem of a mutiny in a country, or an army, a rebel group attacking a little village somewhere and burnt some little houses. Africa has the problem, but it's not Africa. And we are unable to tell the world where it situates, where the problem is. Well, I mean, when Ebola really got hyped up a few years ago, I was in office. And we started getting cancellations, and I laughed, and I told the tour operator from China, you must be joking. I mean, Ebola is not in Seychelles. I mean, miles to the East African coast, and then how many thousand more to get to where Ebola is? You will never smell Ebola, you won't see Ebola. And I had to do a trip to China to address a press conference to enable them to keep coming here so that the groups coming were not canceling. It is an industry that is very vulnerable. The minute there's uncertainty, you lose the bookings. And then it costs you much more to get the bookings back because you have to work 10 times more to make it back. So we need to decide as a continent that we will pull resources together. I mean, take trade fairs. Minister, you've been to so many. When you enter this whole of Africa, some countries are not from Africa. Some that should be in there are plunked in another hall somewhere else because they were too small. It didn't fit that little block that is left. They put somewhere else. Do you get an African welcome at the door? No. That's what we should have. The welcome reception must be African. It must show that we are Africa. It must have the flair, the smell, and that feeling that it is Africa you're entering. And both sides, normally you'll enter one side and get out the other side. Both sides must have it. So that you say thank you when they're leaving, and you say welcome when they're coming in. We must have somebody, a pretty lady or a handsome young man that sits there in these counters that welcomes people. You see, but to achieve this, today we must already be planning World Travel Market next year. How do we achieve this consensus amongst ourselves and with World Travel Market? Maybe I'm naive in the way I look at it. I'm a bit of a dreamer, and I say that often, Minister. Nobody will do it for Africa. It has to be done by Africa, for Africa, and with Africa.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Allen. I will take it from where you start, which is selling unique selling points in Africa, and uniting the tourism partners in the tourism sectors in Africa to be able to like put their heads together and think of how to sell the unique selling points in Africa. All right, now, Honorable Moses, I'd like to take that question back to you. All right, now we've been talking of how to achieve these aims. Whose responsibility is it to bring these people together to be able to achieve that? And then what is the role, all right, of the press or of the media in doing this as well?
Basically, the way Africa is configured is that, well, like Europe, we have the heads of states, then we have got the ministers. Bringing people together is usually done by the ministries, various ministers. But those kickstart the process because government is not in the logistics of implementing things. They kickstarted. They just have an enabling environment where now other players need to come in. I think I'm seeing here a pool of former ministers playing an important role. It might be a terrible thing to think about, but because they've seen it, because the person who comes in is new, still has to learn 5 years, 10 years, whatever. But the likes of Allen, for example, they've seen it all over Africa, Europe, Asia, Americas. Now, so those people have a responsibility because we've got a responsibility. Responsibility starts with us to make Africa the best out there. Then that cascades to the region and to the country. So I think I think what we have today is a very important thing because it's us. We have seen it, we know it, can think about it. We're talking from experience in this regards. Then we need to see how do we now network with the media, because those ones have got their own networks all over, and they can be able to reach a big volume of people to make sure that there's that mass production. And that's what they do on a day-to-day basis. They're there in their computers, they're there in whatever, sharing information, sharing knowledge. Ours is to make sure that we say, this is the guidelines. And then we link to the various ministers. Why I'm talking about that is because when you're going to penetrate a particular country, particularly in Africa, sometimes it's about who you know in that particular area, because you kill to posts on something that you could have achieved at ease, with ease. So I'm putting a challenge, I'm pushing for a challenge whereby, if it's possible, Cleveland, please just get a group of former ministers on the same topics we're talking about, who have been involved in tourism, to say, to what extent can we now move forward? Here we've got a platform, Cleveland, which is trying to unite Africa. What is your role? What can you do in your small corner? Small corner becomes a big corner immediately together under one roof, sharing the same information. Then we start that. It will spiral in no time. I can foresee that. I can foresee it mushrooming. I can foresee it moving in leaps and bounds, because we'll all be talking from experience, sharing all of those experiences. At the end of the day, we would be able to reach greater heights. In Swatini and, for example, South Africa, we have signed various agreements whereby we have said, look, if each of those countries are somewhere like a WTM, maybe one of them has not attended, we market ourselves as a region. And that's what we've tried to do. We were about to finish a convention center, for example, going to be a big one, 3,000 to 5,000 people sitting. But we needed to get experience. So we've had to send people to South Africa, to wherever, just to find out how it's done. And to them, please teach our guys like it's grade zero, so that they can have that appreciation. Because you learn from another person. And if you can cooperate, it's the issue of cooperations. Obviously, the city ministers might feel a bit threatened, which is normal. Follow the right protocols. We should be able to assist them. They should know that this is it's benefiting them. They are the beneficiaries. It's the country first and the people first. And at the end of the day, the glory will be going to them.
I don't really know how, but your camera is breaking a bit. I just hope it doesn't affect the production. And I would sincerely have wished that Honorable Feudal is here with us now, but surprisingly, she's still not able to. All right, I know my next question, you've said one or two things about what I'm going to ask now. You've explained a bit as well, but I want to get Mr. Allen's view of this. How would you like Cleveland.com to collaborate with the tourism ministries to strengthen the promotion of tourism and business vectors in Africa? You said something about it earlier, but I just want us to take it topically so that the audience can be carried along and understand this better. Mr. Allen, please.
Frank, this is a perfect question to end a session. I think Clevenard, and I've said it, I think, in another panel with the press at one time. If Clevenard tomorrow, with the help of sitting ministers, not like me and Minister Vilakati, we are already in the grazing grounds, because we've been and we've moved. If we can get the African Union through Clevenard to organize a sitting, firstly, of some 20, 30 former ministers of tourism. South Africa, there are two great ministers. Mozambique, Cavalos is a superb minister. Malawi has a couple, and Zimbabwe Minister Walter Mzembe is a great man. There are a lot of us around the place. Mauritius has a couple of good ones. Madagascar. If we were brought into a room for a pre-ministers meeting and then say, how do we now assist our own continent, but also our country? Because you've got sitting ministers and they would come at the end of the session, a bit like the head of state goes when somebody else has done the groundwork, to see what do we do. How do we organize a press meeting under the auspices of Clevenard to say now we will move on tourism? And I'm saddened that African Union so far has not had one dedicated tourism forum for tourism in Africa. But we talk about oil, we talk about guns, we talk about coup d'etats, we talk about insecurity. But tourism is an industry that touches virtually everybody in the continent. If it touches everybody, why don't we meet to discuss tourism? And I think, truthfully, it is the one industry where you can have very small players and very big players. But they are all players in the same industry. And if we bring them side by side, we will help somebody grow and to care more about his own country. When people tell me that Africa is insecure, it's because the people of Africa in that particular country or village have not been brought into that tourism industry. If you are involved yourself, Franca, and you see one of your fellow countrymen breaking into a hard car that the tourist has rented and trying to steal his camera, you'll tell him, don't do it. You're going to hurt our industry. I'm also implicated in that industry. Actually, let's help the tourists find a way to get to these unique attractions. So to come back to your question, Clevenard must be encouraged to work with the African Union to get a forum done of past ministers. There are so many, I mean, Egypt, you name it, in the whole of the continent. You have dedicated people that have worked for years in that tourism field, headed the ministries, and today they are in the pastures, grazing away happily. But if you bring them back and let their experience be put together, each one of them can guide their country, their respective private sector trade, different areas where they can be called. I am a lucky one that I'm called to different countries to go and deliver addresses on tourism, particularly tourism, and help the different ministries of tourism. But there are a lot of me around the place. But we need to give them exposure, and there it's a body like Clevenard can still do that. But the only one that can call everybody, that has a budget to be able to do that, would be the African Union. Don't expect Eswatini to invite 20 ministers, former ministers, to come to Eswatini and to meet Clevenard and talk tourism. They won't have a budget for this. The only one that could do it is the African Union, or the regional bodies, maybe SADC or East African Community, could do it on a smaller scale. But it's not time for the small scale. We need to go out, all out, make it happen, and see the benefits after that of it.
Yes, I just want to add briefly there that when I was minister, I formed what we called an African Tourism Board. Unfortunately, because it didn't have financial backing, it is struggling. But what I had looked at was to say one of the unique features or selling points in Africa was started by a man called Allen then in Seychelles, which was the carnival. So that was, because there has to be something that links those various countries to say, to what can we be linked? So I was trying to push that narrative. Unfortunately, before I had pushed it so much, then my time came to an end. But we're able to get to AU to say we have a thought, we have reason to believe that Africa needs to be united from a tourism perspective. And 4 or 5 months back, they warmly welcomed. So it's people who will understand how to actually grow tourism, what path and niches, etc., needs to be followed to make sure that sustainable. Because it's one thing to shake hands and say, hey, we now appreciate your presence. It's another to say, from a long-term perspective, what is there? Because at the end of the day, then you'll start saying in Africa, you guys are meeting on oil, are meeting on energy, are meeting on climate change, are meeting on environment, and you even have a budget. Why don't you have a budget that talks to tourism? In particular, the way in which we framed it was that when you look at tourism, it is one of those sectors that employ lots of people. We have these youngsters who are migrating all the way to Europe because something that will take care of. And yet, when you look at a tourist coming from Europe, he employs about 10 people. One is probably a chef, other one cleaning the bed, the other one washing the linen, etc., fuel stations, etc. So when you look at that, just that one person is employing about 10 people in that particular country, which means we can be able to salvage this issue of unemployment in Africa if we were to put our heads together. I think I rest my case there.
I'll even add a challenge, I think that's what we need to do now. The challenge is for you to be able to call on the African Union and say, we want a meeting of former ministers. If you can do that, our duty to be supporting you would be to explore. When Minister Bilakati speaks about the carnival that was done in Seychelles, yes, it brought the world of carnivals to the country, and which is why Brazil recently called me and said, we want to fill that gap because there's a gap now. The carnival of carnivals doesn't exist anymore. But that is one event. There can be a lot of events. I mean, one event that I thought of always, of the big falls in Zimbabwe, Zambia, the big waterfall that is an icon, is to do a sound and light show where you can have people on both sides of that majestic waterfall looking at the sounds and lights that can, people will come to it because it'll never be the same, because every time you beam a light through it, it'll be different depending on the force of water coming down. There can also be cruise ships that will go North Africa, all the way down to the coast, all the coast of Africa, East Africa, and go up the other side, where you can disembark and embark. So you get fly cruises, you get the cruise itself, and they'll employ Africa because the cruise ship will be around Africa. So the African flavor will be on there. Every second, third port, they'll change the bands playing on board, they'll change a chef, they'll do this, they'll do that. It'll make people of Africa benefit from tourism. But that's easily done. There are hundreds of these smaller ships today parked because the major cruise ships have gone for bigger ships. But we must find the catalyst to bring us together to make this happen. And then you'll find these landlocked countries that has a big lake. I mean, take Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania with the big lake that joins them. You can have a a ship in the middle that cruises them, but a proper ship that won't sink tomorrow. Also, when the fly cruise is coming down towards the coast of Africa, you could have the people move from that landlocked area, go to the coast and board the cruise ship. There's so much that can happen, but we need our bodies, the bodies that rally countries together, like the African Union, to say, yes, the time has happened for us to look at it. But unless it's done, and maybe the pressure of the press can get them to do it. Today we're lucky. The African Union, the chair is somebody who is the head of Comoros Island. So he's already an island person. He has a feel for tourism because they also depend on tourism. He wants tourism to work. Maybe the chance today, Franca, is to make the call for the African Union, as the chairperson is the Comoros president, to say, let's make tourism work. They are part of the Vanilla Islands, so they know the Vanilla Islands well. The concept of working together. But we need the press. It's the Vilakati that'll move it. We need the press to move by the pressure. You see, in a country, a democratic country, you have the executive, the legislative, your judiciary, and a fourth pillar. Normally they say three, but there are four pillars. The fourth one is the press. If the fourth pillar of democracy for Africa says we must now move to get tourism well represented, with a man that understands tourism, who is the chairperson sitting in Comoros, maybe the chance is now to move it forward. We've lost you. Now you're okay, I think. There's a bad line. There's a bad line somewhere. You're frozen.
Yeah, your line is bad. Yes, that's better.
It is a tricky question. I mean, when you say using technology and the media, yes, you can put them together in the basket, but they're actually very different things. I think they have to go down technology anyway. They have to follow and be selling online and doing everything online through their websites, and there's different portals that they bring along. But this has its... But you are also the press. You're also the press, and that's a different thing. Because if you only have platforms and you don't have a press to push it forward, you can have the best little platforms to yourself. and you look at it in the morning with your husband and your 2 kids, and you have a good cup of tea, and you say, well, we've got a platform, and so what? How to make it known, how to distribute that name to the world, to say www and so on. How did they find this? Some countries will sponsor weather forecasts on major TV channels. Yes, you hear them every day. You know exactly what they're saying, even before they start saying it. But they have the bucks to spend. Or they sponsor a football team, and every time the football team starts and they talk about the country and WW so and so. Africa as a whole hasn't got that budget. So we need to work with a bit of brain, and we need to be sensitive to the budgets that we have. So we need to be instrumental in helping partners like yourselves as Cleveland. You're lucky because you are the press and you also have platforms. Should we find a way that the 54 states of Africa tomorrow have their promotional DVD in a site where you can come in, when you hit S, you get Seychelles, Sierra Leone, and so on, and then you can knock on Seychelles and get their promotional DVD. Would not that be nice? So then you promote one site and say, you'll find the 54 here. It won't happen tomorrow. So if it happens with regional bodies or 10 out of the 54, it's already a success. But if we were grouped together, it would become easier to do it. Can you imagine alphabetically you go down the list of Africa, all A's together, all B's together, all C's together? How nice it will be for Africa. How nice it will be to be able to sell Africa. And through each one, by the time you've opened, let's say, Seychelles, and then it branches off, unique attractions, forests, sea, beaches, fishing, you name it, everything that we have. Wouldn't that be good? Yes. But how do we make it happen? Cleveland alone can't do it. They'll need the support of an organization of Africa to push people into that arena. And yet we know that they can help because they've got the platforms and they are also the press. Of course they can help. But are we pushing, our bodies are pushing countries towards Cleveland? Not really. I mean, I talk to many of them. And when I say Cleveland, and they often look at me and wonder where Cleveland has fallen from the sky. If it was a meteor that has fallen down. But we need to work at it. I really think, Franca, Cleveland should make a call to the African Union, speak to the president today. The sitting president of the African Union is the president of Comoros Island. Speak to them, try and get a meeting in Addis with him and some former ministers or sitting ministers, it doesn't matter, as long as they are very focused on tourism. I mean, if I take South Africa, the current chairperson of South African Airways, former Minister Hanekam, or Minister Van Schalkwyk, who became ambassador in Australia, they are excellent ministers. Minister Balala of Kenya, Minister Carvalhos of Mozambique. Zambia has one or two excellent ones. I mean, there's yourself, Minister Vilakati. There are a lot of us around the place. The one in North Africa, there are a few outstanding ones. But do we allow these capable people to be grazing in the pastures or to be called to say, let us help Africa? We can't do that. I mean, Minister Vilakati and me, we can't go and tell the African Union, you need to call 20 of us to sit with you. You, the press, can do it. The president of the African Union can do it. We keep doing our work. I work with many of them, and I keep working. I mean, next week I'll be in Nigeria, but every month I've got 1 or 2 missions. But this will not change Africa. It'll help one country. To change Africa, we need the whole of Africa to be a bit like the games, the football games came to South Africa, where you had that song that said, this is Africa. We need a tourism song that will say the same thing. These are the unique selling points of Africa, and we are here to sell these points.
collective responsibilities. All right. Honorable Villacati, please. Let's get to hear you.
Yeah, I think my brother Alan has already summed it up very well. Indeed, technology is the way to go, because we can't be reaching all the corners without the use of technology. But I think we also have to ensure that it has got the clout, if you will. Because if it doesn't have that clout, people will take us for marbles and say we're just playing games. So getting it into AU is the way to go, because then AU is able then to extend its tentacles all over. And it also has some respects. At AU, we have got what are called, I think, STCs, the various ministries coming together. I've forgotten what STC stands for, but I know that if for example, we have got environment, tourism, natural resources, they're always grouped kind of together in that regards. And then they've got various ministers appointed from the regions, East, West, Central, and Southern. Now, these are the technical committees, if you will, at ministerial level that usually deliberate like what we're doing. And then this is then taken to the main plenary, and where now all the ministers then come together, and then finally it goes to heads of states. That is one way of actually doing it. What we're lacking in Africa, to an extent that I had to push this ATB, African Tourism Board, was that in all of these technical committees, none was discussing tourism. You would be shocked. None. We would discuss water, because Egypt was very strong. It's always very strong, and it will fight tooth and nail to have its headquarters on water in Egypt, because it understands the desert, etc., etc. But the others are just by the way. It's like tourism, for example, is taken like just a private sector initiative, and maybe it's made up of people who just have accommodations and whatever, and we've got money. Yet, this is the crux of what AU is about, to integrate all of these countries so that they can talk with one voice. My argument when it comes to the ATB. So I foresee, because now that they've embraced, in a way, let me use inverted commas, they've embraced ATB. It's an opportunity, therefore, for the media, like Cleveland, to say, hey, Mr. President, what if you had to bring these people under one roof so that we can untangle all of these opportunities that obtain in Africa, so that we can drive the tourism to greater heights. If Europe is able to reach X number of tourists moving from one place to the next, some from Africa, by the way, because they believe we believe that if we go to Europe, then we are better tourists or whatever. Why can't we raise that same profile for Africa? And can only do that, maybe start with 10, 10 former ministers, then increase it to 20, finally to 30, or finally maybe to 40, and then at the end to 54. Because if you bring all of them under one roof at a go, it is not going to work. We will spend more time just arguing and arguing. I've been there. Whenever we now have to have a resolution, the next thing is you have French to English or English to French very well. You spend 1 hour just dealing with a sentence. and not the idea. So if you start with that particular core group, I'm sure me and Alan, we would work out who we think he has already pointed pointers, and we can start from there. But you need to penetrate the AU, because then if it comes from the AU, the heads of states are going to, for this, by the way, they are going to be, so if we get a buy-in from the heads of state, immediately it will flow to all of our, that in that way we can be able to push this agenda forward. Cleveland, we have an opportunity. Cleveland, we have an opportunity. Don't lose this momentum, particularly because we have a president who understands tourism, or a chairman who understands tourism.
But I think there's your point is totally right. But maybe instead of Cleveland trying to do that all alone, rally some press. I mean, 2 weeks ago, we were on your setup here with two very experienced press personalities of Africa. You have EKG sitting in Nigeria, or Wolfgang Tome sitting in Uganda, or the Walk for Life, Mr. Niyi, also in Nigeria. You have so many of them, excellent people. Maybe rally all of you together and say, we will make the call of Africa. I mean, maybe it's a way you lead it, but get the others to be with you. It makes more oomph in making that call. I think it's no more the time for each one to sit in a little corner and hoping somebody will drop food on our table. It won't happen. And the world will get more complicated. Tourism will get more complicated in this post-COVID, post-war era that we are now living in. The Israel-Palestine war, Gaza war, or the Russia-Ukraine war. And there'll be more, because war brings war. And then there'll be more that people will say, well, maybe we've got some old ammunition to use again. Let's have another war. But we must find a way for Africa to rally forces, to say that our people needs to fight misery, hunger, lack of work. And to do that, we need our tourism industry for the continent. We have ample unique selling points, ample attractions. We probably have everything the world needs, and we only get 6% of the traveling tourists of the world. When you look at the whole market of tourism, I think the last statistics I saw was 6%. If that is all we're getting, can you imagine if it worked well, how Africa will be a happy continent? When we talk about people taking arms and so on, if the whole population was happy because they were comfortable in their lives, would you go and fight a neighbor? No, because you are comfortable. It is working. Your life is working. Let's work for Africa to make this happen. Can it happen? If I take the Barack Obama, yes, we can. Yes, we can make it happen.
And then surely Cleveland.com will certainly live up to its responsibility. Cleveland has the technology and also the expertise to be able to bring that into fruition. All right. Thank you so much, Honorable Moses Bilakati. You've been wonderful on this program today, and also Mr. Alan St. Onji. Thank you so much for being my guest this evening. I would have really loved Honorable Fiuda and Nani Kereng to be with us, but unfortunately we were not able to have a connection. Thank you so much, Mr. Alan, once again.
Thank you very much.
And Honorable Moses, thank you for being my guest this evening.
Thank you very much, and good night.
Minister, we stay in touch, huh?
Sure, cheers.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you so much, audience, for keeping this hour with us. And until next edition, we will come your way with another topical issue on this program. I remain Frank Kaligini, and please don't forget to sign up on www.cleveland.com. We're always around to help you create awareness for your brand, product, and then even the continent of Africa. Do have a blessed day.